So thank you very much for joining me. I know it was doing a bit of the graveyard shift, and we've got all the Star Wars stuff going next door. So I was always up against a bit of a challenge, and let's face it, health and safety isn't the sexy side of BIM, but it's an important one nevertheless. So BIM for health and safety virtually sorted. That's the name of the talk today. So before we start, who am I? It's quite nice that we've got a low lectern because often you can't see me, so sometimes I might just come to the side. So my name's Stefan Mordue. I'm an architect and construction project manager. I've got a background in small architectural practice. So about 3 years ago I joined the NBS, the National Building Specification, and I've had two roles there over the last 3 years. One as a technical content author, so writing guidance and technical content for our specification products, and then more recently as a consultant, so helping people with their BIM implementation and also integrating our products and services. That's a little bit about myself. So I've been really fortunate while I've been at NBS that they've allowed me to sit on various groups and committees. So I should really just take a step back. So NBS, for those who are unaware of NBS, we're part of RIBA Enterprises. So as well as specification, we've got publication, there's a lot to us. And at the end of the year, all our money goes back to the RIBA and back into industry, which is fantastic. So this was one of the groups which I was really fortunate to be part of. This is the CIC BIM 2050 group. And I was a communication manager here for a couple of years. So this was a group chaired by Dave Phelp, who you heard speak earlier this morning. And what was nice about this group, it was a collection of 15, 16 or so young professionals. I say young, all under 40. And we had a really good time. We met Chloe Smith, the MP, we had a symposium in London. We wrote a report looking at our digital future, which is a free download on the CIC website. And we've just handed that over to the next group of young professionals, so it's fantastic that that's going to have a lasting legacy. BIM for construction health and safety is, I guess, an area of interest for me. I co-wrote this publication last year with a colleague of mine called Roland Finch. Now, I'm not an expert in BIM, I'm not an expert in health and safety, but I'm really interested in how these two concepts can come together. And I was lucky enough to find a publisher and get this published, which is fantastic. That's led on to another project, so building information modelling for dummies. This is coming out in the summer, so co-authored this with a colleague of mine, Paul Smith, and David Phelp. I think what's nice about this title is that it's going to be aimed not only just at the UK, but further afield in the US, and the fact that the publishers approach some UK authors to write that book. If you're not familiar with these are kind of the reference guides. You can get them for anything, knitting for dummies. And I think this means that building information modelling is going into the mainstream. I'm not suggesting this is going to be in W.H. Smith's or anything like that, but it's opening it up to the masses. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. I've got 4 points. Once upon a time, setting the scene. I always like to start with the story, and I think storytelling is really, really important when it comes to health and safety. Then we're going to take a little look at the opportunities for BIM and health and safety. Then look at health and safety information in the BIM process. And then finally, we're going to have a little look at how you can record and present some hazards and risks. So when we think back to models aren't new. This is Christopher Wren's great building, which is in the trophy room of St Paul's Cathedral. This was constructed in 1673 to 1674, and it deviates slightly different to what was actually built. But I think what this model does is it gives us a good intention to Wren's design intent. What he was thinking, what he actually wanted to portray. The problem is it has no connection with what was actually built. So post-occupation is pretty much useless. We can't really use it for anything. So let's think about health and safety. Well, health and safety is not new either. This is ancient Babylon law. Really, so the law used to cover all sorts of things, so from minimum wage to incest. There was some real brutal laws and where they burn people at the stake. And this was quite an interesting one. So if a builder builds a house for somebody and does not construct it properly, and that house which he builds falls in and kills the owner, then that builder should be put to death. Pretty harsh. Maybe building regulations could have a look at this. But so just the point that health and safety is not new, and it's something we've been considering for a long, long time. So historically, health and safety has been pretty poor in construction. I mean, this guy's obviously hasn't looked at the no smoking on site signage at all. So this is actually going back from 1932, the Rockefeller Center in New York. Haven't been there myself, I'd love to one day. But you probably see these kind of iconic images of these American skyscrapers with these construction workers, balancing on these beams with kind of no regard for their health and safety at all. It's reported at that time, they used to have one death in American skyscrapers per $1 million spent in construction. I like to look and reflect on the Empire State Building as well. So on that building, they had actually factored in one death per floor. 5 people actually lost their life in the construction of that building. So I guess if you look at it from a statistics point of view, they were doing quite well, but any death it shouldn't be happening. We always can probably remember those iconic images of 9/11 and the plane flying into the towers. A plane actually flew into the Empire State Building in 1945, a B-25, and the building was pretty much intact, so 14 people died, but so we've always faced these kind of obstacles along the way. So models aren't new, health and safety is not new. Let's think about its impact, construction's impact on the economy then. So even in times of economic downturn, construction in the UK is a big, big sector, generates a lot of money. It's what gets us out of recession. So this is some statistics from the ONS and UK Contractors Group. For £1 spent on investment in construction, as an indirect impact, we're getting £2.84 out. So it's really, really vital for our economy. Now let's think about that industry for a moment. Considering how important it is, it's also one of the most dangerous and hazardous to work in. So this is some statistics from the Health and Safety Executive. And what's quite nice about this, I was born in 1981, so I can span this over my lifetime, 34 if anybody's trying to work it out. So while we can see a downward trend, I'd imagine this is probably down to recession. We're seeing a dip, but it's not going down far enough. It's still a very, very dangerous industry to work in. So I was quite fortunate at an early stage. I always knew I wanted to be an architect, and that's me when I was sort of 6 or 7 on my bike. I'm now the proud father of 2 young girls, and if one of those said to me, "Dad, I want to work in construction in 20 whatever," I'd try and talk them out of it. So, in this talk, I wanted to take a step back and have a look at this document, the Government Construction Strategy. It's been out for some time now, so May 2011. And this was the real stimulus for the government's BIM mandate. So I'm sure we're all aware of this document, but the main output was we're going to construct buildings for the government cheaper and more quickly. We've got this 20% saving. So I had a quick scan of that document. And we always think of BIM in terms of efficiency and waste and value for money. Efficiency 13 times it's mentioned in that document. Waste 11, value for money 15. Health and safety doesn't get mentioned once at all in that document. So, with that in mind, a couple of years later we've got the 2025 construction strategy. And things are improving here. So this document's saying that an industry that attracts and retains a diverse group of multi-talented people operating under considerably safer and healthier conditions that has become a sector of choice for young people, inspiring them into a rewarding profession and vocational careers. So this document is outlining that to get young people, to get talent in, we need a nice, safe environment to do that. And one of the commitments in that document is this. We need to improve the construction industry, we know that. And one way we're going to improve the construction industry is through health and safety. So improve the image of the industry by inspiring young people through a coordinated approach to health and safety and improving performance in the domestic repair and maintenance market. So let's have a little look at what are the main things causing fatalities and injuries on site. Well, well over half are slips and trips. So 59% people falling over things. 3% people getting hit by things, struck, moving things, falling things. Then we've got 5% that collapse or overturn. This is quite a high one, people getting hit by vehicle movement on site, 10%, pretty high. 7% electricity, I was quite surprised about this one. So that gives us an overall flavour of what's happening on our construction sites in the UK. At this point I thought it was just worth highlighting what's the difference between a hazard and a risk, because some people think a risk is a hazard and vice versa. So a hazard is something that has a potential to cause harm, including ill health, injury, loss of product and or damage to plant and property. So on the other hand, a risk is the likelihood of harm occurring and its severity. So we need to think about those when we're documenting procedures. So that's a bit of the background, setting the scene and the context. So now we're just going to have a little look at some of the opportunities that I believe are out there for BIM and health and safety. So I was, like I said, I was born in 1981. I was very much a child of the 80s. Like the keynote speaker, I had the flashing trainers and the shell suits. And I love fantasy films like this, so RoboCop, Terminator, and you see these kind of visions of augmented reality. So this is RoboCop from 1987, looking through the visor and seeing all this data-rich information about the criminal that he's just about to bust. And I love all that. And these are going back quite a while, and we don't tend to think of these technologies in a construction environment. So this is the CEO of Google. You've probably seen these pictures before of the Google Glass. So connecting up with the power of the internet. So looking through the Google Glass to use GPS and the power of the internet to find your way around things. Now, these I think they've been dropped and they're going to be developed. So, but the technology is emerging. The technology is coming, and how do we use that in a construction environment? I am a bit of a realist. So on the left, this is the ideal. This is a stock picture of the construction industry, and I use this tongue-in-cheek. I don't mean to offend anyone. But on the right, this is what we're dealing with. This is the practicalities of it. So how can you use these lightweight technologies in an environment like that? If Big Dave is going to wear these glasses and look like a fool, he's not going to do it. My daughter dropped my delicate iPad and £80 to replace a screen. So we need to think about how we use these mobile technologies in this construction environment. So tracking and sensing, if we remember, we'll go back to those statistics, 10% of people die by getting struck by things. So we can start to think about vehicle movement around the site. So this is actually in production now. So this is a small device that sits at the back of the hard hat. It's produced by a company called Mizo. And you set a proximity up. So it may be, for example, 5 meters. If you come within 5 meters of some plant or machinery, it just sends a little vibration in the back of the hard hat. Not rocket science, it's nothing more than that. The manufacturer tells me it's something like 34 pence a day to run. Again, these are coming to fruition now. Training and communication. This is one of the key aspects I believe that BIM can deliver to the health and safety industry. Communication. So this was actually taken from a really good academic paper. They looked at all different systems of exploiting BIM BIM information displays and how they can communicate that back. So what you're seeing here is a typical site porter cabin, which you might have up and down the country. An LCD screen, what you can get at least, 300 quid, £299 now. And this is about getting essential information to the site workers, to the site force that need it. It may not be the 3D model, it may be some schedules, but it's just a way of getting that visual information into the site porter cabin. A bit of a generalisation here, but when you think of the site force, They might be quite migrant workers, so projects come together and they disperse. There may be lots of different languages spoken, so to communicate in a visual way is a very, very powerful method. This is what we want to avoid. This is not that long ago, so this is taken from February. A firm in Scotland was fined £60,000 when a worker fell through the roof to his death. Very, very tragic. But this is what the coroner said. He said, in this case, the difficulties arising from the language barrier resulted in fatal consequences. So again, could have been helped in that instance. Again, moving down to London, I'm sure you all know about this sad case last year. Man crushed to death by concrete. Again, the court heard that this gentleman didn't know what he was supposed to do on some occasions because of his lack of English. So again, yeah, if we can communicate in a visual way, it's very, very powerful. So how do you get information to the site workers? So maybe you're designers and we work in the confines of an office environment, and we're using computers, but how do you get what's typically transferred in a drawing, maybe laminated to the people that need it? This was given to me by some friends over in the States at Balfour Beatty. And this is something that they call the smart box, or smart box if you're American. And essentially what it is a computer, it's got an internet connection, it's got a keyboard and a mouse, and that's it. But it's in a robust housing, so a forklift truck can come, pick it up, plonk it around the site. These guys can go and they can check up-to-date information. So because they've got that internet connection, they can validate information, they can get the most relevant up-to-date information. Again, it's not rocket science, but very, very effective. So maybe you've had a look at the cave environment on down the road, which BIM Technologies have got for that kind of immersive environment. This is the simulation centre in Coventry. Imagine, if you will, a big 12-metre wraparound screen, which they call a cave. So a contractor will come, he will upload his model, bring his site force here, and you can see those in the background, those cabins, they're actually classrooms. So what they're doing, they're actually blending simulation with actually actors. So what would happen if Sean would fall over and cut his leg off? They can act out these scenarios in a safe, simulated, safe virtual world, if you like, before you even get on site. So this concept of building virtually and digitally in a completely safe environment, you can start to rehearse and plan it before you get to site. So on-site verification, this was kindly given to me by Crossrail. So again, going back to the notion of mobile devices, we've all got mobile devices, I'm sure. I'm sure we've all read the statements that the iPhones that we've got today have got more computer power than Apollo 11, which took man on the moon. So they're really, really powerful devices. We don't use them for phone calls anymore. We use them for email, internet connection, GPS, all this kind of stuff. And more and more you're seeing them on site. So we can start to verify information in the field, but more importantly, we can start to update information. So today, owners aren't just procuring building, they're procuring digital information. And that's a really valuable asset. And unless that information is updated, then it's pretty much useless. So this is a way that you can verify health and safety information and feed it back into the model. Again, I just want to say a caveat on this, because I like to try to give a balanced argument of the pros and the cons. This kind of scenario requires a different mindset. So BIM is a behavioural change program more than anything else. Many companies, so for example, will ban sites such as YouTube, because they think we're going to be watching fluffy kittens, whereas we can actually put a lot of good information up into the cloud. But companies may ban that, so we need to look at that. Also, this is classed as a mobile device. A lot of mobile devices or telephones are banned on construction sites. So how can we use an iPad again? So we just need to reevaluate existing policies and see are they actually applicable today. So automated check-in, I think this is kind of the ultimate dream, isn't it, of building information modelling, that you can click a button and it will do everything for us. But automated check-in is not new. I mean, you can go back, early research goes back to 1964. an early papers of this. So the concept of being able to set up a series of rules that the model will then check to validate information. So this was an academic study. You've got a simple square building, and what this is doing is analysing some rule sets that somebody has set up. So in this case, if it detects an aperture of a certain size, it will automatically put a full arrest system round. You can get some quantities, you can get some visualisation, and happy days. But again, there is a caveat to this. So when you look at any type of legislation, whether it's building regulations or health and safety, sometimes rules and regulations are black and white. It's either X or it's Y. Other regulations are open to interpretation. So it can get a little bit grey, so how you can check. But I think with automated checking, you can start to check a lot of mundane tasks. And the other point I'd like to make about this is that this doesn't kind of rectify poor design or anything like this, and it also needs human intervention. So David Phelps and some others talked earlier about automation, and if something can be automated, then it will, but it still needs a human, me and you, as design professional, to make a judgment call as to what's right and wrong. So are we all going to be out of a job? No, probably not. But this type of stuff will make us make our jobs easier, I believe, anyway. So this is a company called MGF. They do kind of excavation works and stuff like this. And what they've done is they put a 4D kind of sequencing model up into the cloud, in this case YouTube. So everybody's on site, they can look at this video and think, right, yeah, I understand. You move that first, you move that. And it's just reinforcing understanding. I'm not advocating that everybody goes away and learns off YouTube, but it's just an additional tool, I think, that we can use to reinforce that everybody knows what they're doing. But again, this comes back to the argument that we need to reevaluate our existing processes and protocols. So can we actually get access to these? Do we have an internet connection on site, for example? In the past, project management tools and I guess CAD tools were two separate things, really. So you've got the graphical database and you had this project schedule and time-based software, and they didn't really talk to each other. So I'm sure you've heard 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever. But now we can start to link up the graphical element with a time-based element, so we can start to see sequencing. So what does that mean for health and safety? Well, it means you can start to plan out and think about, I'll just give you a scenario. Say it's a hospital, for example. You've got a big MRI scanner to get into the building. When is the best and safest place in the sequencing to do that? What place am I going to lift it in? Can I get it through the corridor, etc., etc.? And because we've got that time-based element, we can start to also think about clash detection. Now, I don't mean clash detection in the magenta pipe going through the yellow pipe and the green pipe and the services. You know, that's the typical image we get, isn't it? Which is good, but I'm thinking about more on-site clashes. So going back to that notion of a lot of people die by getting hit by things on site, I don't want a lorry load of insulation rocking up at site when the primary school across the road kicks out at the same time. You know, that's just asking for trouble. So we can start to think of clash detection in terms of those parameters. So this is Turner Construction. These are a large contractor outfit in, well, globally, I think, but predominantly in North America. Now what you're looking at here is a 3D BIM safety submission that they submitted. So the New York Department of Buildings, I think they are quite forward-thinking, actually, for I guess a modern day, our version of a council. So if you're working in their jurisdiction, then you need to use their 3D BIM safety submission documents and guidelines. So you have to use 3D objects, but also site-based objects as well. So we tend to think of objects as components and stuff that you can buy, but as a contractor, you need to set out your site. Where's the material laying down? How are we going to get stuff in? So you can start thinking. And they will do some basic validations on that. I don't know to what extent. I do think they are quite basic. And they'll do a 3D walk around before they get to site. But what's quite nice about this, as part of that, they've made a number of these 3D site objects available Unfortunately, they are just in a Revit format. But there's a number of there, but I think that gives us something to think about as well. So if you're a designer or a contractor, you know, you're not going to maybe specify any of this stuff, but you still need it. It's still vital information in your model. So this was given to me by Eurobuild, so we can start to look at zones of no-go areas. So just showing a crane sweep, for example. So we can start to think, actually, you shouldn't be in that area of that building site because that's the sweep of the crane. So we've got some really good tools and techniques. But BIM's not going to stop stuff like this happening. So January 2013, cast your mind back, Vauxhall London, cloudy day, helicopter flies into a crane. I think 2 people died, including the pilot and somebody on the ground. Now BIM couldn't really prevent that, but what we can do is we can learn from it. So we can reenact, reconstruct the environment, see what happened, what can we learn. And as morbid as it sounds, we can also see what would happen if that crane was to go over. So what effect, how far-reaching in the site would it be? So there's a big but here. That stuff's all good stuff, but it's too late in the process. It's all post-design. You know, this is all contractor stuff. So I'm sure you've seen these diagrams before. So this is Patrick McLeamy. Had the pleasure of meeting him last year. You see this type of stuff in any kind of project management book. So if you look at the blue line, the ability to impact costs decreases as we're going along the project timeline. You know, bread and butter stuff. I want to turn that on its head. So the potential to influence and prevent construction industries decreases as well as we go along the project timeline. So what does that mean? We want to be focusing on planning and design stage before we even put a shovel in the ground. That is the most effective form of safety program, starts at planning and pre-construction stage. I think just going back, what's quite interesting about that, if you go back to Wren, which we started this story off, that Wren was probably the architect and master builder as well, so he was thinking about all these things. But over time, professions, you've got designers, you've got contractors, the designers looking after the health and safety of the design of the building, somebody else is looking after health and safety of the occupation, and we're not looking at it in a holistic view. So I think that's another element where BIM can come in. So now we're going to have a quick look at health and safety information within the BIM process. So we've got information coming from everywhere. Maybe you're the client. Maybe he's procured or she's procured a building before. We've got existing health and safety files. We've got survey information, perhaps. Then we've got information coming from the design team. Maybe they're using various British standards or specification documents. But then there's also information coming from the contractor and the supply chain and the trades and the trade union. So how do we get that information into the model? How do we extract it? How do we get it in a digital form? And how can we make use of it? So let's start thinking about hazards then. So there's a number of hazards that we can think about. We can think about process hazards. So you're doing a chemical plant. Then you've got activity hazards. So how you're going to construct it. You've got location hazards. So a roof isn't inherently dangerous, but when you're 5 meters up constructing it in a high level location, it is dangerous. We've got legislation hazards, building regs, and then we've got emergency hazards as well. So if something was to happen, how do we actually prepare for that scenario? And all of these could be a number of things, really. They could relate to the owner, they could relate to the use of the building, they could relate to the construction of the building, they could relate to the design of the building. So we've got hazards and risks all the way through the process. So let's think about floor object. So just simply saying a floor that is used to take loading of a data store is inherently dangerous is not really helpful. What we can do is we can take the floor object, we need to think about the function, and then we think about the process as well. So because objects have relationships with other things, we need to think of them in their context. So all of a sudden that floor, it's got some weight issues, you've got electricity, ventilation, all this type of stuff. So we can start to think about the bigger picture and how that floor relates to these other things. So, which literally just come out this month, CDM 2015. How does that fit with BIM? What does that mean? Well, I think a lot of it goes hand in hand. It's all about coordination of information. And I think a lot of the processes and techniques of a BIM process can aid CDM and vice versa. I did a talk at the Association of Project Safety to a room of CDM coordinators, and you know, they're very, very sceptical about building information modelling. What does that mean for them? Are they going to be out of a job? Is it all going to be automated? So the new regulations have they've done away with the CDM coordinator, and they're putting more emphasis on the principal designer. So we all got a duty to think about these things as well. So there's a suite of documents. We're coming up to 2016. We've got BS 1192 all about collaboration. We've got the PASs, so part 2 all about the capital delivery of the building. We've got part 3 all about the operation. Part 4 all about maintenance, so COBE. Part 5 is about security, and that's in draft. And there's another one which is floating around. So one of the groups that I sit on is BIM for Health and Safety. It's chaired by Gordon Crick of HSE. And they're proposing 1192 Part 6. This is just a proposal, and it's all about health and safety information. So its full title is PAS 1192. I love it, they put these massive long titles. Collaborative Production of Information, Part 6, 2015, Risk and Health and Safety Information, blah, 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 blah. So what are the key benefits of that document? What is that document about? Well, it's talking about consistent document, how we can manage and communicate health and safety, hazards and risks. You know, going back to those 2 case studies of those, the guy falling through the roof and the guy who died of the concrete, communication, I think, could have maybe prevented those. So the document's also looking at improving tools for detection and how we can evaluate hazards and risks, how we can reuse health and safety information as well, and how we can gain from experience. So I really liked the examples from Great Portland Place, Portland Estates earlier, about those little videos and passing information. I thought it was really, really useful. Number 4, so fewer costs and delays rising from data loss. So this is going to be potentially the scope of the document. So we're going to represent health and safety hazards, risks and factors. The document is going to look at how you can embed health and safety information and data. So what is the process for that? We need to standardise these. What are the key processes and exchange points? You know, how can we map? And what are the benefits of cost program and carbon? So let's just think about an object, a BIM object. And I've purposely used one here, so I'm slightly out of my comfort zone. There's a bit of height work, so I started to think about, well, what is an object? So yes, first thing that swings to my mind is geometry and shape, and we have got that, and how that object connects to other things, and the performance and the identity. So what is that pipe? Has it got a classification? Has it got a name? How can I find it in my model? We've got some code information about the maintenance of that object. We've got some dimensions. But then we can start to think maybe about clearance as well. So you've got the graphical side of things, and then you've got non-graphical as well. So remember, in these PAS documents, when he talks about a model, it's not just a graphical model, it's a geometrical model, it's a graphical model, it's got non-graphical information, it's got associated documentation. So this is all the non-graphical stuff, all the attributes and the properties. So this is where we can put the COBE information, but you can also start to look at hazards and risks. So let's just look at a data cupboard, for example. So I've just taken some standard regulations. We can start to pull out some key information here about that object. So if we look at things like government soft landings, so remember that BIM is just one piece of that pie of that 20% cost savings. There's other things like lean procurement, there's also government soft landings. And government soft landings is all about getting early contractor involvement. It's also about thinking about health and safety and how you're going to use that facility from an early stage. So at a concept stage, we can start to think about these objects and how are we going to maintain them? How much space do we need to get in to access them? So this is going back to my earlier example from the New York Department of Buildings, and this is a crane which they use. And So the level of detail on this is not to manufacture that crane. It doesn't have to be a realistic depiction of that crane. What we're looking at are key dimensional points. So we're looking at the length of the boom. We're looking at the circumference of the swing. So we're just looking at, it looks very crude, but that's all we need. Then we look at that non-graphical information. We can start to think about the type of the crane, the manufacturer, permit. All cranes need a permit. We can put hyperlinks to that permit. So we can start to think of all this information. And health and safety information is an increase. We don't just think about everything. Rome wasn't built in a day. So we think about these things gradually. So from a concept design, here's just a boiler. So develop design, we can start to think about space requirements. And as you go through to technical and construction handover, you can start to think about more detailed requirements and the documentation and O&M manuals and all that type of stuff. So I had a little stab at some COBie data drops. What type of things should we be considering? So stage 0, so this is kind of the strategic briefing stage. So this is where you're probably identifying health and safety risks and hazards, maybe preparing an initial draft pre-construction information. So you're looking to the client, has he got any existing information or documents that you can look at? The stage 1 and 2, you're kind of in your concept stage, so you want to start reviewing any contents of the existing health and safety files that you've got. Stage 4, you want to be meeting with the design team, you want to be reviewing any design changes that's happened, particularly from when you've moved from a concept to a design and development stage. You want to start reviewing that sequencing. And then 5 and 6, contractor supply relevant information. So we've got lots of products coming from the supply chain. We need to get their information early, preferably in a digital format. And then in 7, post-occupation, we need all the relevant documents, certifications, certificates, and manuals, and all that type of stuff. So when we think about an object, not all that information has to live in the object. Think of an object as a placeholder. Now, we've got information that lives in the object, we've got hyperlinks to other things, and that's perfectly fine. So here's an example of a boiler. Within that object, there's some sort of hyperlink that links to the O&M manual for that. Now, sometimes there's a good reason to actually link to an external database or manufacturer's database, because it's probably more likely to be up to date. So yes, it doesn't all have to live in the object. So finally moving on to the last bit, how do we record and present some of these hazards and risks? Here's a very, very simple example. This was given to me by Casey Rutland at Arup Associates. And they started to consider things such as asbestos. And they used a simple exclamation mark using traffic signal, red, amber, green. Everybody's familiar with what those mean. But because it's a 3D object, they can start to schedule information from that. And however you slice and dice that model, it's always going to be there. So I'll take a sectional cut of this model, and it's there. I can do an elevation, it's there. So it's great. So the guy who's actually going to be working on this and needs to know where the asbestos is, can see it clearly, it's communicated clearly. So this is taking it to the next step. This was given to me by Balfour Beatty. So you've got the model here. They've got symbol markers. And if you click on the marker, you've got a little photo montage and what it's going to look like. And you've got the CDM register. So we can start to link all this information up. So IFC as well. So IFC has been mentioned a couple of times. So IFC has a property set called risk. And this is another way which we can capture some risk information. So if you look up here, it's got some, probably can't see that at the back. Risk can take all sorts of things. It could be a business risk, it could be an insurance risk, but there is a category there for health and safety risk as well. So that's a way in which we can record that. COBie, I know we've had lots of fun debate about COBie today, but COBie has an issues tab on that. I'm not saying COBie's perfect, but it's a form that we can all use and transfer information. So why not use it as a risk register to start logging information? So we can attach this to an object, we can have a risk. Is it high, very high? We can make an assessment. What's the chance? What's going to happen if that risk actually happens? And we can link to other bits of information. this is, I'm not going to say where this is or whose office this is, but our caretaker, Nick Young at RIBA Enterprises, assured me he's going to clean this up. So imagine the situation, you come to work, over the weekend, somebody's kicked the door down, you need to go out and replace that door. The information's probably in there somewhere, don't ask me where, it's like a needle in a haystack. So we're starting to digitize this information, put it in databases so we can extract it and filter it and use it for other means. So how do we move away from these big lever arch files? So one thing I would say is think about who the information is for. So think about facilities management for a moment. Is it going to the contractor? Have you got a dedicated FM manager who's probably a construction professional? Or is that facilities manager a caretaker who may not have construction experience but needs to extract information from the model to go and replace the door? So this is just an example. Again, this was Eurobill kindly gave me this. And what they done was they collated all the information, health and safety file, manual, and chucked it all up on a website. And they tell me that the client's very happy. It costs them about the same amount of money for producing all these lever arch files. And yeah, it's going to be there for some time. They can access that information whenever they need to get it. So think about how you're going to retrieve information at a later date. So let's recap for those at the back. How can we translate information into something meaningful? So we kind of covered that. There are some new techniques and processes that we need to adopt. Can health and safety be embedded into BIM? Yeah, I believe it can be. I think we've demonstrated that. What information can be gathered? All types of information, right from the design stage. Are there new skills required? Well, CDM is putting a lot of emphasis more onto principal designers, but no, I don't think there is. I think the collaboration is going to help with that one. And let's start thinking about a digital health and safety file. Let's move away from these big lever arch files. I want to leave you with two quotes here. So 1994, we're going back over 20 years. Latham construction team said, experience in other industries, for example, ICT, retail manufacturing, suggests that a failure to understand and adapt human behaviour, me and you, rather than technology is the biggest impediment to collaborative working. So I've talked a lot about technology and process, but let's not forget we're all humans at the end of the day. We need to bear that in mind. Here he is, the Phelpster, another quote, the biggest danger is that we get bogged down in the technical discussion when BIM is a behavioural change programme more than anything else. So if you take one thing away from this class, please take this away from me. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate I've got the bit of the graveyard shift now. So Royal Mail, email, I don't mind. I'm on the various Twitter channels and LinkedIn. So I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm wrong? Is there other bits that you can share? So I think we've got a little bit of time now. If we can open it up maybe to some questions, debates. Anybody got any questions? Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if it was yourself, Stefan. Maybe recently I saw a presentation of a 3D sort of image in which there was also an identification of asbestos in an existing facility, and I thought that was a very powerful application, warning maintenance technicians of a risk. Mm-hmm. Is that, I don't know if that was yourself, I can't remember, I've seen you present.
Yeah, shown various case studies like that, but anything that you can link up information and getting it to the relevant person that needs to see it at that particular point is really, really powerful. I mean, it's not, I'm sure Lee is doing a fantastic job on his Empire Strikes Back, and we've seen some really good technology and all this type of stuff. But I want to bring this back and say, what can we do here and now? So never mind 2016 or 2025, what can we do here and now? And stuff like that, very simple things to implement, like I say, very, very powerful. Well, thank you very much for your time. Final plug, BIM for Construction's Health and Safety is available at all good retail outlets, $19.99. But all in serious, you know, we talk about BIM for efficiency and all this type of stuff, but let's just think about health and safety. It's not the be-all and end-all things. Health and safety is not the centre of the universe. A lot of health and safety practitioners will think that is, which is just part of the process, just one part, but it's one which I think building information modelling can help greatly, and I think it can help us produce safer assets. So, thank you very much.